Sylvia. I'm the curator for 13 Ways of Looking, and today I'm going to be facilitating a conversation which will look at NeuroSpeculative AfroFeminism research, and we're going to be exploring how we can create a space for women of colour in technologies like virtual reality. And today I'm really pleased to be joined by Hope, Ash, and Carmen. So thanks for being here. Ash
Hi.
and Carmen, maybe we can start with you guys. Maybe just introduce yourselves a little bit and tell us a little bit about Hyphen-Labs and NeuroSpeculative Afrofeminism.
I can start. I'm Ash Baccus Clark. I am a scientist and writer and multidisciplinary artist, and I'm really interested for those questions. And most times they lead to more questions rather than answers, but it is something that I think as a society and a culture, we've moved away from this idea of like a citizen scientist who has agency to explore the world and their environments, and particularly our own bodies. So I'm trying to bring men again. Carmen and I have been friends for like 15 years now, and NeuroSpeculative Afrofeminism was an outpouring of that friendship. And really, it was a project that we made for us because it was the summer of 2016, and it was the start of this, precipice of turmoil that we find ourselves in. And so, in order to understand what we were, slouching towards, we made this project, and it became bigger than us. And now it's out in the world and hopefully inspiring other people to, in the vein of Octavia Butler, to be prophets and, call what you see out in public what it is, and build truth around that, that honesty and that transparency, and to create work that looks at radical futures of how things could, should, and will be different once we take over control, from corporations and whatnot. So thank you so much for having us. We're really excited about this opportunity, and I'll turn it over to Carmen.
You're on mute, Carmen.
Oh, true. I'm Carmen Aguilar y Wedge, and as Ash said, we've been friends for like 15 years, and I've always been very curious in art, and Ashley was kind of she was a scientist really interested in art history. I was an engineering student trying to figure out what I wanted to do. So we really came to creating this piece with like a fresh vision and without having the weight of institutional pressure, I think, which is one of the reasons why it felt so freeing to create the project. And at Hyphen-Labs, I'm a co-founder with Edge Tankal, and we collaborated with Ashley on this project. And what we're curious about is, rather than trying to change existing institutions from the inside, what does it look like to create our own institution, to create our own space, to create our own vessel for learning, for moving, for having cross-cultural experiences. And we also are curious about technology, and technology from an object to a digital experience, and how we cross through the environment and through into our consciousness, and how can we create experiences that use technology to further the means, the hopes. And so we started with NSAF, and hopefully we'll have a lot to contribute in the future as well. And we had the great opportunity to meet Hope. And while we were looking at research and virtual reality from one lens, she was looking at it from a totally other perspective. So we were really thankful to be able to use the story as a platform for collaborating with others and letting other people have the choice to define their own creative endeavors and using the platform and using the story itself.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Ash and Carmen, for just telling us a little bit about how you guys met and how this project came to be. I think it's always really nice, I think for myself anyway, to hear the background of how things began. And also great to have you, Hope. Would you like to also tell us a little bit about yourself and the research that you undertook related to NSAF?
Yeah. Yes. Hi, my name is Hope Idaewor. I'm a mixed methods researcher, and my research focus is around how we build experiences and products that are centered around the nuances of our culture, our intersectionality, our positionality. And I actually met Ashley and Carmen while I was in my grad studies. So I come from a computing / human computer centered interaction background, and I was kind of exploring VR and culture in my grad studies, and found out about NSAF, and that was honestly for me the first time that I saw like a space in VR for Black women. And so I jumped on it. I was like, this is great. And I think in my studies, what I was able to do, like Carmen said, was kind of take the NSAF experience and basically kind of place it in a different audience than it usually would be for. So I was able to look around youth. I was able to look at how do VR experiences like NSAF that really create a space for women of color, how does that impact youth, and how does that impact learning and computing education in high school? And I took that, and basically my research was centered around like, what do we do differently in the design of VR to support self-expression and representation in Black youth. And I was specifically working in Atlanta, Georgia. So the group that I was working with was focused in that context. But it was a really, really great experience, and I can't wait to share more about it. But that's just a little bit of background of how I took the experience and brought it to a educational context.
Thank you, Hope, for sharing a little bit about your research and your connection to Ash and Carmen, and your connection more widely to NeuroSpeculative Afrofeminism. I think sounds really exciting to kind of think about how this project that came about with Ash and Carmen and Hyphen-Labs as a collective, and then how that's translated to your own personal research and working with young people. And I think it's really kind of interesting to think about how this virtual reality piece can work and relate and connect with people at different age groups and different locations, because I'm based here in the UK in Coventry, and the work has been received really well at the exhibition, despite the limitations of COVID, meaning we couldn't show the full VR piece. But I think despite that, there's just so many layers to the work that I think over here, it's been a project and an idea that people have kind of really taken on and been interested to find out more about. So I think, it's really great that we can have this opportunity to talk about it, because as I said, where COVID has limited what we could show, I think this conversation provides that platform to share a little bit more about the work, and Ash and Carmen, like what you've been able to do, and also Hope, the research that you've been able to share with us. So I think maybe then my first question would be to you, and I don't mind who wants to answer first, but a larger question is, how can we create a space for women of colour in technologies like virtual reality? And I guess maybe to unpack that question a little bit, not just how can we create a space, but why do we need to create a space for women of colour in technology like virtual reality?
I can take that. That's okay. If you had asked me a few years ago, I would probably have a different answer about how we can create a space for women of color, especially Black women. And I think now, just from given the perspective of a few years, I think the way that we create space is by giving Black women, Black creators, the tools that they need. Because what I have seen is that when we try to come into the institution, if that's academia, if that's tech, if that's government, the institution isn't ready for us most of the time, right? It's not ready to receive all of the ways in which our backgrounds and cultures impact the way that we show up in the world. And that is going to be very different across nationalities, across lived experiences, across, even being neuroatypical. Most institutional corporations are functioned as a one-size-fit-all model, and that model right now in technology, tech bro model, you go into a space, and if you don't play ping pong or want to drink craft beers at 6 p.m., you're probably not going to fit into that culture, the company culture. We're reappropriating language from what it means to build a society in order to build our institutions, and those very institutions are not built for us. So in order to create space for women of color, we need to give women of color funding. We need to give us computers. We need to give us raw materials so that we can build. You need to give us stardust so we can build spaceships. All of that. That's what we need. We don't need any handouts. We don't need anyone saying you can come into the institution. Here is, $200,000 a year for you to run this department. We don't need that are the things that we need in order to go into production. And that's one thing that working at Hyphen-Labs is tough. You can go into production on something, you prototype it, you make it to your specs, and you execute it, you can build anything. It doesn't have to be, rocket science.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly add to that. Okay. Yeah, no, I think that's so powerful, Ashley. And one thing I want to touch on is what you said, like giving Black women the tools. I definitely think that really is the core. That is really what we need to be doing and thinking about, right? Because, I come from a space in tech where I am the only woman usually in the room. I'm usually the only woman at the quote unquote table. Having to speak from my perspective as a Black woman, as a Nigerian woman, you know what I mean? And I think what we've seen in the tech space in the States is, we have products and experiences that are built without us in mind. And they're built from, like these tech bros that are basically building experiences based on themselves and their colleagues and their friends, right? And that's why it's so important to not just create space for Black women, but to also give Black women the tools to create their own spaces, the tools to create their own stories. And I think that's what, NSAF, that's what really connected with me and why I really wanted to bring this to youth. And, in my research, I basically ended up doing a workshop where I gave young women of color the tools to create their own experiences like NSAF. It wasn't as fancy or as immersed as the experience, of course, but the whole point was, how do I ensure that they can have these conversations amongst themselves? They can literally create these experiences based on the stories that they want to tell that have been muted for so long. And that's what's so important. And it starts with the youth. It starts with, young girls who want to go into computer science or computing or technology and are being told, yeah, you can't do that, or, oh, no, this is going to be way too difficult for you, and so it's that space, it's creating that space, and it's giving them the tools to create their stories and to rewrite the story of like what a typical Black woman is. So yeah, just wanted to add that.
I'd also add too, is like making more transparent the processes that go into creation. I think for us, we we saw that there were no avatars that represented women who were from science and technology and who were also from non-white backgrounds as digital avatars. And we really we needed to make those ourselves because we had a story that involved very empowered women. And so when you start to play video games, you may not necessarily understand how those characters are made. So it was a process for us to understand, okay, how does it go from concept to 3D sculpting to then motion capture to putting it onto a platform like Unity or Unreal, gaming development platform, and trying to make that also a kind of transparent process so that other people could come to us and say, yo, how do you do this? And we could understand how to do it, and we could work with other people who work in those disciplines. So I think having the tools and then also creating that network of like, we are here as a resource as well. And that those resources aren't behind paywalls, they're not behind closed doors, they're not behind frameworks that have excluded Black women, women of color, marginalized individuals, and have purposefully marginalized them, because what is being made is not representative of the stories that we've experienced or we want to see necessarily. So having our own agency and being able to make that choice, I think, was an exercise in itself with NSAF.
Great, thank you, guys, for sharing your perspective there. I think I'm just thinking about it in relation specifically to NeuroSpeculative Afrofeminism, and I'm just wondering this idea of institutions not being ready for women of color, and I guess NSAF is specifically looking at Black women, and this kind of need or wanting to create space. I guess particularly to Carmen and Ash, was that kind of one of the key reasons that you created it, or was the idea already there and then the VR and technology kind of came afterwards? Like, how did that come about, and how does that fit with this idea of creating space for women of color in VR?
Without giving away defining details. So this project really came about because Carmen and I were living together in New York in the summer of 2016. It was July, right after Philando Castile and Alton Sterling were murdered within a few days of each other. I was working at a really corporate job in marketing in New York. And if you know anything about marketing in New York, you know, the basis for Mad Men, it's, Madison Avenue, like it's the place where, the mythology of the United States is built. We're bought and sold commodities through, and I was like in the belly of the beast, and I would come home every day and Carmen is like, this isn't you, it's sucking your soul out. You're running an entire department by yourself because no one else will help. It was just like all of these things that when I was in school, I was taking all science classes. I didn't have a chance to take a womanist history class or African history or African American history. It was all like physics, chemistry. There wasn't time for that. But
and I remember you had curiosities and like places you wanted to go within the space, and they kept like keeping you in one role. They wouldn't let you they wouldn't let you get into machine learning and the things you wanted to do.
Yeah, I had an opportunity to like work on the tech team on a project on AI, and this was before I got interested in it. But because I was on the marketing team, that wasn't okay. I couldn't, there was no, even though, the job was sold as like this cross-functional role where I would be working with finance, with retail, with, all the different departments. When it got to the point of like actually doing something in technology with the tech team, that was off limits to me because I had to know my place. There was this kind of like anti-intellectual sentiment, which is very prevalent, if you ask me, in I wouldn't say like, tech companies such as Google or Apple or something like that, but I mean tech adjacent, where it's like this company is a technology company, right? Everything that you do is on the internet, and it has to be, sites need to be responsive, mobile needs to be, it has to be cutting edge. And to think that like you're working in an institution and you can't have curiosity for an institution is how this project was built. Because I don't like being told if I'm curious about something that, give me the opportunity. If I do all of my work over here, which I was doing, then on my lunch break, which I'm supposed to have an hour-long lunch break, let me be able to go to these lunch and learns that the tech team is doing, so I, increase my net worth by learning how to code. It's as simple as that. And so Carmen was living with me, or I was living with her, however you want to live it, and doing this really amazing program at the School for Poetic Computation. So she would come home and she'd be like, I'll make you chicken if you read my reading to me. So, it was like a mutual, what are we doing right now? Like mutual aid. But we were exchanging things that we knew how to do. So that was NSAF started in a very anti-capitalist way, because it was something that we were interested in exploring. If you know how to write and I know how to build a bridge, and you want, beautiful story written about this bridge, how can we make it happen? So that our fourth collaborator Nitsan and I, built those bridges between us that we wish that if it wasn't so focused on the scarcity mindset, would build. Sorry, I know I was talking too much. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much like that. Like we were also collectively learning. I was enrolled in the school, and I would bring home all of the essays that we were reading, and we would have these conversations about, and we were listening to Blood Orange, and we were listening to No Name, or we were listening to some really amazing artists at the time too, and just feeling like we need to create a space for our own healing. Because I don't want to walk outside with Ashley having to feel like she's unsafe when I, a white passing Latina, can move through the world and I can see the constant microaggressions, macroaggressions. I can see there continues to be violence because we live in a violent society. And Ashley and I are both very connected, and we've been connected since we've known each other as like young children. We've always taken care of each other because we're only children. We're like each other's sisters. So we needed to figure out how can we make something that reinforces our worth, that reinforces our reason to belong, that responds to the issues that we see happening within the product landscape, within the digital landscape, within the arts, and in a history of smashing art movements, smash the demos that were coming out. Because if nobody says anything, then, and nobody makes a statement that gets the tech bros to fall in love with what you do, and then tell them, hey, you're actually using a technology, and you love this scarf or something, you love anti-surveillance, but who are you training your data sets on, and what are the faces, and what are those data sets being used for, and how can we infuse critical thinking into a more play-based, like surreal or imagination or object-based aesthetic.
Oh, guys, thank you. To kind of hear that, hearing that background, you can get a sense that it's a very personal piece of work, actually, in many ways, like where it began and then what you were trying to do. And I think this idea of like a space for healing, I find really powerful. Like, that, the way in which the world exists is just so painful and problematic that, using the VR and the art and the technology to, to create the space that you would want to be in, like to kind of separate yourself from kind of, some of the, massive issues that are, you've touched upon, in terms of Ash's background and where she was working and wanting to kind of come out of that and not be boxed in. And I think, I think the work does do that. I think it does take you somewhere else, when you kind of are engaging with it and you, you put that headset on and you hear the sounds and you see the visuals, it does take you somewhere else. So I think that idea of that space for healing and not just that, but also the other elements you were trying to do within that in terms of like challenging the, the ways in which VR and tech has predominantly been a white male space and, kind of trying to smash that and pull that apart. I can see you want to say something, Ash.
Yeah.
Sorry, Carmen.
The last thing was that, like, what I've realized since we started it until now, one of the key things to that healing was having somebody constantly say yes to your idea. And so Ashley and I we would call each other like our hype ladies, like our hype men, because like she would be like, okay, what about this title, NeuroSpeculative Afrofeminism? And I'd be like, yeah, let's do it. Or I'd be like, what if we did it like this? And she'd be like, yeah. And so it was just this, we both grew up with very strong mothers who also kind of bucked that system and they were single parents who were raising children, and they always told us yes, I think, in terms of how we were thinking. And so maybe not in terms of what we were allowed to do.
Speak for yourself, because now, because of this global pandemic, I'm back in the house with Miss Vivian L. Clark, and she tells me what I can't do every day.
So whether it was...
Now I have a bedtime again.
So whether it was like a practice with each other of like, how do we say yes? Because we've grown up in this culture of, no, you can't do this. No, you can't do that. No, no, no. So how can we, by allowing ourselves to, and like give ourselves confidence that our ideas have value, and that our relationships have value, and being able to relate to each other and find strength in that relationship. And then because we trust each other, and building trust between us and the world around us and the people we were working with. And there were a lot of like ups and downs. It wasn't an easy project to get through, and it's been a huge learning experience for us. But one of those spaces I found for healing with you, Ash, was your ability to constantly reinforce my own value, and by always being like, yes, we can do this. Yes, we can do this. Yes, we can do this.
It's like, sorry, I just wanted to, one last thing.
This is our conversation with each other.
It's like Kendrick Lamar said, I might kill everybody around me or heal everybody around me. So which one would I would prefer to heal everybody around me, because we've been killing everybody around us for too long. And, right now we are in the grips of warmongers and people who are set on extorting other people to give up it's just like, this is actually something that we've read in history books. Who thought we would be experiencing it in our lifetime? So the antidote to that is for us to build up our backbones, fortify ourselves, put our mask in place so that we can create spaces of healing, so that we can usher people in and say, there's another way.
Brilliant. And I just wanted to bring Hope into the conversation with this, leading on to like the second question I wanted to ask, which is around, can immersive virtual experiences empower women of color by exposing them to narratives created for and by them? And I think, this space of saying yes, supporting each other, hyping each other to create what you wanted to create, that sense of empowerment. I just want to, bring that to you, Hope, where maybe you could bring in your research where you exposed young women of color to NSAF and some of those like tools and techniques, and was there a sense of empowerment that came for the young people as a result of this? And did some of the the passion and the energy that Carmen and Ash are talking about, like, could you see that, you know, with the young people that you worked with?
I have so much to say in response to the whole conversation, but as I'm trying to collect my thoughts. But to answer your question first, yes, you know, I think, you know, as we in the workshop, so these girls were around like 15 to 17 years old. And it's funny because I also always imagine myself at 15 to 17, thinking of what the heck I wanted to do with my life and what yes looked like, and, you know, regardless of the no's that I was being told. But I think one thing that always sticks with me and that I never forget about the research around NSAF was that the girls really, the biggest thing that came out of the research was the conversation and the fact that NSAF was literally almost like a probe to really talk about like representation. And like these girls never had a space before where they could even use technology to like have conversations with like other girls in their classes and just say, hey, like, yeah, we're Black and this is what this means today. And hey, like I have never had a space to actually talk about this. I've never had a space to share what I truly feel. I've never had a space to like reimagine what the future could be and what that could look like if I was in NSAF and if I was in VR and if the VR was centered around me or built by me and not someone else. And so I think that was the biggest takeaway from them, was that they were able to really have those discussions, which spurred on like more thinking and more reimagining for themselves and thinking through. And, you know, that really gets them to really think through like, what can I actually do in the future? What can I do tomorrow? Right. And this whole idea of like, what is my yes versus like, you know, regardless of the no's I've been told. I think that was the biggest part. It's, you know, now as I was kind of talking through this experience with them and working through the workshop with them, it was a constant reinforcement of like, yes, you can, like, yes, you can do this. And this is how. Yes, you belong in this space. Don't let anyone ever tell you that you don't, you know? And so that was really the biggest takeaway. And as I kind of reflect back on like my experiences, so I was a computer science student, I mean, not too long ago, like 5 or so years ago in undergrad. And I'll never forget like just what it felt like to be in that space with literally no one else that looked like me, and with like advisors telling me like, hey, yeah, you know, you can take 3 computer science classes this semester, but keep in mind that, you know, a homie over here is also taking that amount and he's a lot smarter than you. And, you know, he's going to be, you know, you might not make it, just so you know. And so it's just like, there's this like pain and almost like this imposter syndrome as well that I have felt for so long. And I think that that's why this work was so important for me as well, because this is what art and tech should look like. It should look like a space for healing. It should look like a space where we can actually reimagine stories that are told about us. You know, it should reflect the experiences that we have experienced, you know, that we have gone through all of our lives that, you know, white men or women might not understand. And that's okay. But that's the point of the art and the work, is to show that and to show you that perspective, right? And honestly, we just need so much more work like this. And I just wanted to add too, there's a concept in the tech space in the research world. It's 2 things actually. It's around, I think Carmen mentioned this earlier, it's around like critical design and like basically conducting research from a critical lens, as well as a speculative lens as well. And those are 2 things that I really hold dear to my heart in my approaches, and how, even as I work at a big tech corporation right now, and I have these conversations, but it's just not to that level. It's not to that because these institutions are not ready, right? But I think critical design and speculative design, they really talk about like, hey, we should be looking, critical design says, you know, let's actually like take a critical lens. Let's actually dissect and like be reflexive about these things as we're like designing solutions and as we're creating technology. Speculative design says, hey, like, let's look forward into the future and let's not be afraid of designing future possibilities rather than just solutions, which tech is so used to, right? And that's what I love about NSAF, because it really starts that conversation around how we can like inform design through a critical lens in a speculative way that transcends tech, institutions, academia, conversations. Like it transcends this type of work transcends so many different layers because it is a space to heal. It is a space to reimagine. And I think we need a lot more work that is critical and speculative and less innovative, quote unquote, right? And yeah, so that's that. This is just like really, really dear to me because it's so important.
Great, thanks, Hope. I think it's again good to hear like how the young people kind of received it, but also I think your kind of personal response to it for yourself, you know, just not as a researcher, but as somebody who engaged with the work on a personal level, and what that's meant in terms of empowerment for yourself, but also the research participants that you were working with. And you know, I'm just thinking about, you know, for yourselves, Carmen and Ash, the reception that the work has received in the various different places that you've shown it. Would you say that there has been a sense of empowerment come through with like the people that you've met, you know, in different spaces where you've shown the work? Like, how has that come across in the way people have spoken to you, or the way in which they've like given feedback about NSAF?
I just wanted to say that hearing that, like, I was almost tearing up right now, because really NSAF was that project that, you know, we would have wanted to see when we were in high school, college. Because I started off, you know, I wanted to be a neurosurgeon, started off pre-med, and I got into these classes, and I was very fortunate because I was a part of this program at UC Santa Cruz called MARC. So it's Minority Access to Research Careers. And all my girls were in it. It was, you know, it was all Nigerians, Ethiopians, Black folks, you know, Latinx folks. And that's what it was. And we, every day after school or after our classes, we would go into, you know, our advisor created this little space for us inside of a very, very white college, you know, and pretty much every student of color who was in sciences was a part of this program. We got funding, they fed us. It was like a family. And years later, Carmen and I went somewhere and someone told us to read this book, Whistling Vivaldi. And it says that, like, especially in the sciences where you really don't see, you know, we're not told that we can be scientific geniuses, right? Like, when was the last time a Nobel Prize winner in physics, some of the natural sciences, mathematics has been Black, or a Black woman, or a Latinx woman? You know, when has that happened in our lifetime? Yes, you know, we win Nobel Prizes in literature all the time. You know, Miss Morrison, we see that representation. We see the representation in music. Kendrick Lamar just won a Pulitzer. But what about, like, what if I'm like, I want to see Mae West, or, you know, who are some of the other famous Black scientists? You know, where's George Washington Carver's Nobel Prize? Because he literally, you know, every peanut thing that we have is thanks to him. Madam C.J. Walker, you know, why can't they win Nobel Prizes? So this project was like, let's have a speculative story where the woman protagonist is Black, and she's on that level of, like, give her a few more years and she's going to be in Sweden accepting her award. But we don't need those accolades, because we can build, you know, a laboratory ourselves and start researching and building things that address our personal needs. And for me, had I had that in college, I wouldn't have left science, because right now I'm science adjacent, right? I like left the institution without getting a PhD or an MD because my entire grad school career, I was the only Black woman on my floor. And every time I would go into the mouse room, I was carded. And I'm like, I've been here for 2 years. Why do you card me, but you don't card my colleagues? And the security guard said, because you look like you don't belong here. And I was like, well, thank you for letting me know, because it just confirmed what I thought was going on. And after that, instead of being strong and confident in myself because of imposter syndrome, I decided to leave. And for us, NSAF is a calling card to that little Black girl, to that little, Guatemalan girl, that little Mexican girl, that little Asian girl, that little Filipino girl. Don't leave. You stand straight and you stand proud and you tell them, thank you for letting me know. I'm going to keep it moving. I'm going to walk down across that stage with my degree, and I'm going to have my own lab, and I'm going to start working on some of the questions that impact my people. Because right now, especially with Black women, there's a epidemic of Black women dying in childbirth. There is an epidemic of Black women in the stroke belt having Alzheimer's because of environmental toxins. There are all of these things that are impacting our folks that no one's studying because it doesn't impact them directly or their families. My mother is from the stroke belt. She's been having migraines since I was a kid because, probably because she's putting relaxers on her hair since she was 10 years old. And now we see that causes brain cancer. Like who, if not us, is going to start researching and coming up with solutions for these things? So I'm hoping that this space encourages young girls, stay in science, build the future that you want to see.
And I would add to that in terms of the institutions. One of the things that happened for me when showing this piece was like, you would get to the award ceremony or you would get to the institution and you'd be like, so this is it? This is like the end of the road? Like what? So like you go and receive your prize or you go and receive your round of applause. But if you don't have the support network around you and you don't have the people who are constantly asking for your vision and asking you to like continue having the institution and the pressure on top of you of like, you need to come up with what's next. You need to like fit into our framework that we've never built for you, or that wasn't built for you. And you have to somehow adapt it so that we like it and that we say yes. I found that quite challenging and refreshing, because it was like, oh, what it looks like to be an artist is very different than what it actually is to be an artist and designer. And so I think that the work has been received in very positive ways. And then it's also, and it's been championed by a lot of institutions. But what the work is asking the institutions to do, those who hold the power within those institutions easily turn a blind eye to that and say, this is the collateral damage that has already been done, and we don't necessarily need to address it. We're just going to wait for more groups to come up with pieces that we're going to laud and show, but then we're not going to necessarily give you more tools to create your next vision.
Right? We've seen that we're one and done because people can't quantify the ROI on VR. So, we've made this piece that has gotten a lot of recognition, but we never were able to receive funding. We received one grant after 2 years, and it's like, people want to see this work, but they don't want to support this work. So now we've had to put it on hold for 4 years while we do other things to make money. And we're still barely scraping by, and it's frustrating to see like our peers at like Sensorium, or what's the one that did the Obama one, Felix and Paul Studios, I think. It's like, how are these people able to have a whole production studio, but when it comes to making work about women of color, we can't even afford our rent, you know? Or we're doing talks and, you know, they'll pay us $200 to talk about our work, and then I have to chase somebody for 3 months to get my money. You know, it's like, this is a violent act towards us as women. You want me, I'm giving you a service, right? I'm giving you content, you're putting it on your platform where people can watch it all over again. But when it comes to me, you know, asking about my net 30 payments for the money that you owed me for a service that was rendered months ago, and I can't collect on my rent, and now I have to live with my mother. You know, there's something very wrong with this equation. Even though I love my mother to death, I want to have my own apartment so that when she's on the phone from, you know, the time the sun rises till it sets, then I have a space to go where it's quiet.
Wow. I think there's a lot there, but I think that kind of I think it's a good place to kind of
well, I think the point is the
unfortunately,
realities are
yeah,
very different
exactly.
than the imaginations
Yes,
of
and
like, oh, okay, this is what it looks like to be, you've been all over, you know, you've been touring the piece all over. Every time we tour the piece, we have people coming up to us saying like, do you know how to use a drill? And we were like, we've done this 20 times, like, please, like, can you just give us...
We build our own installation. We are the engineers and the architects and everything else. Don't ask us if we know how to use a drill, because the answer is yes, always yes.
Yeah, so I think that like when it comes to the institution, they have certain imaginations about who we are, and they're trying to really understand and dissect, almost as if it's science, how we created the work. And that doesn't give a lot of space for transformation. And let's say, because we were one certain person, we were certain people 5 years ago, 4 years ago when we created the piece, we are completely different now. And there needs to be space to grow within institutions as well. And I guess that's why institutions don't change, is because they were rendered perfect by some group at one point, and now they've created so much red tape and so many boundaries that like are, and doors that you have to get through in order to do something, which is why it's like, okay, we have to be making our own things, because it gives us choice, and versus being controlled by somebody else's imagination of who we are and what we're supposed to be doing.
Good point too, Carmen, and I think actually you talked about this. Like it's all about, it's almost sometimes just a buzzword, right? Like here in tech, we have like diversity and inclusion conversations all the freaking time, and that's literally what it's like come to be. It's a buzzword. It's, you know, there is no, and at the end of the day, it's like they're still looking for an ROI. They're still looking for like, okay, how do we monetize inclusion
and scale?
How do we, scale? Exactly. Or how do we replicate this so that when you're gone, we can replicate this system, but not replicate you? Because we don't want to have to pay enough to you, but we want the system in place.
Yeah, I think in terms of it's interesting kind of like imagining this future, which comes across in the work, and then the reality of the life that you're living, having created the piece. And I think what you're saying about institutions and wanting to just engage with the content, but then not think about how to take it further, not think about actually what is the work saying, what does the work speak of, what does it ask, and that actually just by showing it and that's it, you know, you don't answer what it's asking. You know, the whole idea is to create space, you know, and you can begin to create space, but you don't just create it once and stop. You have to keep working at it and opening it up and allowing it to grow, and like you said, like the funding for this work to keep progressing. And I think you know, I think it's, you know, you're right, it's good to think about what a fantastic piece it's been and the great things it's done in terms of empowering people, but the reality of the creators and the designers who make this work, and you know where they're at now, that piece has been created and it's been shown. And I think, you know, that's you know, it's really important that I think that part of what you've just described, you know, is important that is heard, I think. for people to know that you can't, you can enjoy the piece and go home, but then what about the people that have invested the time in creating it, and where does it go next? What is the future for something that is about the future? And I think that's I think this is a question that I think you could have endless talks about, but the reality of it is it's not just about talking now. It's about the actions that come out of the talks and things, and I think maybe that's part of the richness of the work, is that it's bringing up these conversations that I think, had the piece not been created, particularly in VR and the platforms that you guys work, the fields that you work in, this type of conversation wouldn't be had, where people, perhaps it seems like there's a sense of feeling that, what could be taken out of the work has been taken out of it, and then it's kind of been left without a place to kind of move forward. And I think that is the question, in terms of, what next? Do you feel like there's more potential for it, or do you think that it's kind of come to as far as it's going, given the limitations of the field that you're working in?
I'll say something really quick.
Yeah.
That NSAF was born out of a relationship and out of a trust. And so I think that our work will probably go on forever, and we'll probably continue to collaborate, whether as Ashley and Carmen, as Ashley and Hyphen-Labs, as Edge and Carmen, as Edge and Ashley, or as Ashley and whomever. But there will be moments where we connect, because when we connect, something makes us curious. And I think what's that's distinct for me is that I know that my curiosity is scalable, because a lot of people are curious and have similar curiosities to me. So we get to come together, and we ideate, we talk, and we come up with things that get both of our curiosities going, and we can expand from there. So I think that our collaboration will probably be a lifelong collaboration, and NSAF is one part of a healing that we're doing as we transform to the people that we want to be. And we know that we have each other's support because we trust each other. And NSA, and I'll let Ashley talk about where NSAF is going specifically, but I think that it's as a designer and as an artist and as an engineer, that work of questioning never stops. So as long as we continue having and not getting complacent, not accepting and not getting distracted, then we'll always have something to build.
Thanks. And I think, maybe Ash, you could finish up for us with telling us where you think you see it going.
Yeah, well, more than anything else, NSAF was a prototype to see how a relationship can transform through project-based learning, I guess. So this is just an idea that I'm working through right now, but more than anything, NSAF allowed Carmen, Edje, and I to test the boundaries of our friendship and to grow stronger within those boundaries.
Really test the boundaries.
Because
really
had we not done
everywhere.
it, we wouldn't be as close as we are. Had we not gone through the ups and downs and turmoils, of working with family and friends on something as intense and as fast moving as NSAF was, then we would just have a surface level friendship. But now that we really had to go through the wire and back, we're now in a place where when we work on projects again in the future, we know exactly what to do and how to do it so that we don't get caught up again. And it should be like that with any working relationship. It's like sometimes you have a moment where you come into it and it's complete and pure energy. Other times it's utter chaos. And in those moments of chaos, you need to step away and regroup. And then when you come back, when the energy is, back to a place where you can do something and execute it, then it becomes beautiful again.
And so right now we're in a space of, we're in beautiful harmony, and we're working on part 2 of NSAF, and it's called Encrypted. And we can't say too much about it right now because it's under contract, but it, you know, look out for it because it's coming, and it's going to be more accessible, because we found that VR is not an accessible technology. You know, Quest headset. If you, what's the other one that's cheaper? I don't even know. If you don't have a Go, if you don't have a Google Cardboard, then you can't use VR. You know, you can watch it on YouTube, but that's not a good user experience. When we showed it at Sundance, who can afford tickets to Sundance? You know, I couldn't bring my friends in, but these producers and PR people and press, all their homies could come in and view the work that we created for little Black girls, and little Black girls couldn't get in to see it. So we have been partnering with schools, with community centers, and bringing our, you know, we travel with these big Pelican cases. So when we come, we look like a band so that people can view the work. And it's like, I don't want to travel like that. You can download or put it on your iPad or your phone, and then you can view it. So there will be no more VR until VR becomes more accessible to people who look like us. Yeah, and we're excited about it.
Thank you, Ashley. I think, you know, that's we're going to end the conversation here, and you know, I think it's great to hear that there is something coming, and I think, as we said, everything that we've talked about, you know, could be its own talk on in and of itself, and I think VR and accessibility, I think that is a big topic, you know, to discuss further. But I think, you know, it was really important that you said, you know, NSAF was about, you know, young Black girls being able to access it, and I think, you know, it was great that Hope was able to do something with that, you know, like to make that accessible, for, even though it was, you know, for a small group. I think it was really important that that could happen, and I think, you know, thank you guys, thank you Hope, thank you Carmen, thank you Ash, so much for your time today, and just kind of, yeah, sharing your thoughts on, and, you know, NSAF, and, you know, some of the wider issues that have affected it, good and bad. And so I think, you know, it's been really a really powerful conversation, and thank you so much for your time.